Buenos dias, everyone. It is time for the fairy panel. I'm your host, Allie Earp from Crown to Listen. If you know me, I have a raging hard on, yes, fairies, for historically accurate. That's my cat who has a cold right now. He's also Persian, so he has no face, sneezing. I have a raging hard on for historically correct fairy lore. So if the cats get crazy, I'm going to have to get up and kick them out, just so you know. So let us... Stop it. I swear these cats. Dive in. I don't know how many people are here. Apparently 6 are talking. So yeah. So we are going to cover the definitions of what a fairy is, the origins, types, how to protect yourself, and then famous fae. Fairy that you might not realize are fairy, and like things that are tied to fairy that you may not also realize that are fairy. So this is a nice little slide that I found a quote, there it is, of they're talking about Bab, who is one of the, she's a triple goddess aspect of the Morrigan. And just talking about back in 967, when the Vikings first came over, do not worry. We didn't even rehearse this. We're just like flying by the seat of our pants. When the Vikings invaded, they, history records all those battles and everything. But as time went on, historians and folklorists related all that in the terms of the supernatural. So when this battle went down between the Vikings and the native Celts in 967, this was one of the poetic renditions of it. Kind of like Homer, the Homeric poems and stuff that are rewriting Greece. So Ireland took Ireland from the Firbolgs, who were the native people of Ireland. And then the Norse came and started fighting with the Irish. And history calls them, and folklore calls them, the Fomorians. So now you know. Next one. So first of all, we're going to talk about the Cottingley fairy hoax. So this is why no, this is not alcohol, it's apple juice. This is why no books or content or anything anywhere about fairies or like Celtic mythology written after 1920 is academically considered a valid resource. So 1917, we're in England. This 16-year-old girl, my laptop's over here, that's why I keep looking. This 16-year-old girl goes and visits with her cousins. There's a stream in the backyard. They keep getting told not to go in the stream, stay out of the stream. And they keep getting told, it's not us, it's the fairies. The fairies are getting us wet. So it's like my dog ate my homework kind of thing. So, because they keep getting in trouble, they want to prove that it really is the fairies and not them. So the 16-year-old takes her amateur photographer father's camera to prove it. And they come back with this photo of fairies. And it's a really famous series of photos. Look up Cottingley fairy photos and you'll find it. So the dad knows that his daughter has like a knack for photo editing. So right off the bat, he's kind of sus. Now this is 1917, mind you. Like they didn't have anywhere near the technology that we had. Popping in on the comments real quick. Yes, Vikings did gentrify the British Isles. Yes, apple juice. Yes. It basically was Photoshop. So I'm just not even going to look at myself right now so I can keep an eye on the comments. So dad didn't believe it because he knew his daughter was a whiz at Photoshop back in 1917. Mother did believe it. mother was also part of the Theosophy Society. Now, in the 1917s, this part of post-World War I was the birth of spiritualism movement in the world in general. But Theosophy really kicked off. And she took the photos to her local Theosophy Club meeting. And the president of the whole Theosophy movement, what was his name? Gardner something? Edward Gardner. He said, hey, this is proof of what I'm talking about. The world's undergoing a major metaphysical change. Next slide, Jamie. So Gardner then took the photos to an expert who worked for Kodak at the time, who said that the photos were accurate in that they accurately portrayed what was placed in front of the camera. So that was his nice little way of saying what this is a photograph of is a genuine photograph. I cannot say the veracity of what is being photographed is real, but whatever was put in front of the camera was real. So, but they're known as the kids who fooled Kodak. Anyway, Gardner took these photos and published them in several spiritual magazines. He made prints, he sold them, he had his own Redbubble shop. He did really well with them. So he was publishing all these magazines. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a rabid spiritualist himself. Get out of the comments real quick. Yes. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, rabid spiritualist till the day he died, saw the pictures in one of these magazines and said, oh my God, this is incredible. Got totally invested, totally bought it hook, line, and sinker, and then wrote about this particular iconography of the fairies as tiny little females with long flowing hair and gossamer wings and tiny little like flower crowns. Just took it and ran with it. Wrote 3 stories in his magazine, The Strand, about it. The first one was December 1920 edition. And to the day he died, he 100% believed that these were real. In 1983, on her deathbed, Elsie, who I like to call Elise because my brain just mixes it up, finally said, hey, next slide. Oh, you did it. Okay, good. Finally said, hey, you know what? It was a hoax. We scammed the whole thing. Sorry, we got you. They took pictures from one of their little gift books at the time, Victorian little picture books, cut them out, drew wings, cut those out, attached them to them. I know, right? Dang, see. Put hat pins on the back, stuck those. If you don't know what a hat pin is, I'm sure everybody here does because J fashion, but it's a long pin. They can be like this long, and with a little like ball on the end of it, and you use those to like stick through your hat, to stick through your hair, so your hat would be like on the side of your head on really windy days but wouldn't go anywhere. So they taped those or however to the hat pins, stuck them in the ground, and then forged these photos. All basically because they were tired of being yelled at for playing in the river when they weren't supposed to be. Changed the whole world because they just wanted to not be in trouble. So he died fully believing that fairies were real, and he wrote about this several times. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, ironically enough, was conned by a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old. And he is the reason why the Disney fairy imagery exists, why Tinkerbell looks the way Tinkerbell does, all those little fairy figurines, stickers, books, everything, Winx, any of those shows where they're like tiny little miniature humans with wings and they're always female looking. It's all his fault. And it's actually all Elsie's fault because she came up with it. Real quick though, actually, let me see what the next slide is. Okay, so there is a precedent for the tiny human form, but I'm not going to talk about the yet, but there is precedent for it. So when we talk about fairies, first thing people comes to mind are the 6 Celtic nations. Go ahead, Jamie. So originally, the territory of what was considered Celt extended all the way to Turkey. They called it Galatia. If you know anything about the Bible, Galatians, that's the book of like whoever wrote it was in Turkey at the time. And me scrolling in the chat. Yeah, children do go to great lengths to do what they want, doing the absolute most to get away with continuing to do the absolute least. So yeah. So these 6 Celtic nations, though, when we really get down to brass tacks, are Ireland. And the ancient word for Ireland, these are all basically going to be either the name of the country itself came up with or like the Latin Roman name for it. Hibernia is Ireland. Yeah, man. You know what? I've seen some crazy good crypto, not AI, but just like some of the stuff that it's in the cryptid shit posting groups I'm in is pretty good. But I mean, you just know it's not legit. Anywho, Scotland, Caledonia. Scotland, by the way, has like they went ham on terrifying fairies. Like you're not gonna find anything scarier than a Scottish fairy. I'm sorry. My ancestry is Norse, Swedish, Danish, Welsh, Scottish, and a tiny bit of like Western England. That's pretty much it. So yeah, the Scots, like we got crazy fairies. Isle of Man, which their language is called Manx. The cat with no tail, the Manx cat, also comes from there. That's why it's called Manx. And the Manx word for Isle of Man is Mana. I'm butchering it, but it's impossible to pronounce Manx for me. Cornwall, which is Demonia. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Cutapillar, I don't know who you are, but I like you. You can sit with us. You know your shit. Brittany is not all of France. Brittany is this tiny little tip over on like the coast, but it is France. So technically, France and like French shit is canon for Fae. Now you know. I get into that later too. And Wales, Welsh, they call it Cambria. The word, oh yeah, in Brittany, the word for Brittany is Britannia. So Britain, Britannia, the Britons, that comes from Brittany, even though it means like England. Yes. I feel you, cutie pillar. So Wales. Fun fact, anybody know the name of the Welsh language? What's it called? Ready? It's spelled Cymraeg, and it is pronounced Cymraeg. Cymraeg is the pronunciation for the Welsh national language. You're all welcome. And it's impossible to pronounce. So, fairy etymology. We're going on. So our modern word is fairy, right? So I get into it a lot with people because the modern word for fairy, when people say fairy, the first thing everybody thinks of course, is Celtic things. But especially here in America, they could be talking about natural land spirits, indigenous land spirits. Are they necessarily fairy? So we get hung up on terminology. Spoiler alert, they are. However, you say fairy, people immediately think Ireland. So fairy came from really old English. And then even before that, it became Faerie. I'm butchering it because I don't speak French, which was Old French for fae, which was even older French for the Latin fata, who were the fates. So the French word fairy evolved all the way through because the origin of the fae in France were the Greek fates. How do you like them apples? Yeah. The French call their fairies fées, I'm going to assume, F-E-E-S. Fée, fes, whatever. The vanishing people. Go ahead, Jamie. So another word for the Fae collectively, you can call them Fae, Fairies. Um, every country has their own name for the fairy, but they all basically mean the same thing. They call them the vanishing people in Europe because there were 3 documented times that they were supposed to have departed our dimension completely, not just the country, the entire dimension. Let me pull my notes up for this one. I don't think I can. So the first departure, 14th century, 1389 ish. Is when we see the first reference of the first departure. Somebody's chat came up there and I didn't see it. Yeah, we here at Rose Forêt don't speak French. Exactly. And I do also have a great disrespect for the French language. Sorry, Jamie. I think you're actually yes, tete croissant. I think Jamie's actually a little bit of a Francophile, so my bad. So, anywho, they were supposed to have left. Get on the boat and leave. 1389. And Neil Gaiman actually makes reference to this in Sandman, which I was very excited about. Season 1, episode 6, and the Sound of Her Wings. The episode where they are in the pub. Dream and Death are about to meet Hob for the first time. And he's over there talking about how everybody just dies because they decide to, and that's not going to happen to him. Morpheus is saying to Dream, a delegation of fairy came to me last night. They're talking about leaving this plane forever. And she says, why don't you just loosen up a little, or whatever the fuck she says. But yeah, they make reference to fairy leaving. Shh, it's a secret. Just you and me and the entire internet know. So the second departure, so they leave, right? They leave in 1389. Well, in the 17th century, Bishop Corbett says they're still there. He makes mention of the Fae in pre-Reformation England. So maybe some are gone, maybe some are still there. Third departure in the 19th century, Hugh Miller says the very last ones left Scotland in the 19th century. And the reference that I found for this, Catherine Mary Briggs is the ultimate. Catherine Mary Briggs and Wirt Sykes are the ultimate. Like, there is no higher source than them on the whole subject. Like, they're the beginning, middle, and end of the word on it. They say that they just dipped out of Scotland and they were angry and pissed off and they were like, we're out. But the Irish and the Scottish, actually, especially in the Highlands, have never subscribed to the belief that the Fae have ever left. That's usually like a Southern Scotland, England belief thing. So, origins. This is where it gets fun. And this is where some of my, if you have any kind of like beef with Christianity, you might have some issue here. So, historians used to go around, folklorists and historians used to go around the countryside and talk to the actual people who lived in these villages, and the old people in the villages and the towns, the old farmers, the ones who remember the legends and the lores of the land from centuries before. The belief most commonly ascribed to by the very, very elder population, especially in Ireland and the Highlands, is that the fairy are actually fallen angels. Okay, you BRB. Shall we wait? No, we'll just catch up. So, they are supposed to be fallen angels. And here's the tea with that. So the story is, yeah, I am going to keep going, Meredith. The story is that when Michael was throwing Lucy and all of his little buddies out of heaven, the whole host of angels who Lucifer was supposed to have like hypnotized a whole number of angels, because God knows they couldn't like willingly decide to just. So when Lucy left, everybody else started pouring out of heaven. Like, it was like a rats leaving a sinking ship. So the son noticed this and said, hey, God, Dad, you might want to close the gates or something, because everybody's leaving. All of the angels are leaving because they're all following Lucifer because he has them all entranced. So God goes, oh shit, you're right, maybe I should. Raises the gate. The second he raises the gate, the spell that Lucifer had over all of these angels was broken. And because there was such a deluge just coming from the pearly gates, some of them were already in hell, way down yonder in the burning pit. Some of them were on the land, some of them were in the air, some of them were in the water, some of them were like in between. Wherever they happened to come to during their fall was apparently where they had to stay for eternity until Judgment Day. Yes, you are back. Best friend's great grandma. See, exactly. And that's what a lot of folk magic is you find a lot with ATRs, African tribal religions too. And the religions that slave created, the Haitian hoodoo, they have to blend their old beliefs and the old religions with the colonizers' beliefs to maintain their history, but also not get killed or like still operate. So the Fae, according to all of that, super slave Eastern European, yeah, yep, Russian, yeah, it's literally all over. Any old colonized folk, whatever, like that's the tea. So fairies, according to a good number of people, are fallen angels. So I put this one in here because it's Japanese too, and it has a couple different great tie-ins. Urashimataro. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that. I only took like one semester of Japanese culture. Oh man, we're already 22 minutes. Urashimataro is a story about this guy who basically fell in love with the mermaid, spent like a couple hours with her, was really worried about his mom back home. So he was like, hey, I got to dip out. I'm worried about my mom. So she's like, all right, but take this casket with you. Don't open it. That's a common theme with fairy stuff is there's always a taboo, a prohibition. Like, okay, but if you do this, you're going to have consequences. So he did. He took it up. He went back to his home. Mom was gone. Whole village was gone. House was gone. Didn't recognize anybody. He had actually been gone for hundreds of years. And it was only like an hour or two in fairyland. And so once he realizes this, exactly, Dummy did open the box and a mist came out of the box. The mist was the 300 years that had passed. And as soon as it hit air, he basically turned to dust, disappeared, died, and dissolved. Because time moves differently in the fairy worlds. So all of the names for all of the fairies in as many countries as I could cram in here, all of these words in the native countries mean fairy. There's Kitsune, Japan, Munjavegi, which Manx, Isle of Man. Huldrefolk is Scandinavia. Orang Bunyan, Indonesia. Orang Bunyan literally means hidden people. Huldrefolk literally means hidden people. Tylwyth is Welsh. She, that's how you pronounce that, Scotland, which is also where we get Sith from Star Wars. The AOC, Ireland. Fifoye is a Louisiana Creole version of fairy that they took with them. Kanatilla is Lakota, out here where I live. Mogwai are real. They're Chinese fairies. They really do look like that, though. The Aziza and the Dahomey people, the Aziza actually means hidden people, too. And the Hadenosani, I'm sure I'm butchering it, I'm sorry, Yoga. And the Mayan have the Aluks. Corrigan and Brittany. Like, every country has fairies. So here's the different types, the classifications. Yeah. So don't even get me started on Berserk because of what they did to the Norse. So there's different classifications of fairies. There's trooping. So fairies that are trooping are basically your Seelie court. They are your fairies that live together in groups or will congregate in large groups. And they have their raids, which is a procession, RADE. But they also mean RAID because the raids also go and steal humans for stock. Trooping fairies can either be nice, the Seelie court, who are still iffy. You don't want to mess with any fairies. Solitary fairies are almost always malignant and nasty, with one exception that I can think of, two exceptions I can think of off the top of my head. The wives. Now, this is in here because there's an entire section of fairy folklore where human men find selkies. You know what a selkie is? It's the seal people. They take off their seal skin and they go on land. And then if you capture their seal skin before they can get back into it and slip into the water, then you have control over them. Well, men used to do that and keep their little seal wives. But they also come in bird form. There are water wives where they're basically merfolk but not merfolk, who come in Wales. They just come out of the lake. It's very Lady of the Lake, Arthurian. In Scandinavia, they have wood wives. They're a type of fairy. They're absolutely gorgeous up here, and in the back, completely hollow, like a tree. So they leave their hair down long, and they don't like to show their back to people because then people will know that they are fairies. Yep, and there's always a prohibition. Like the men will steal the seal skin, and then there will be a taboo put in place, and if they fuck up, then the wife disappears immediately. And he dies forlorn and heartbroken, always, because it always happens. House fairies. House fairies are an exception to the nasty solitary fairy rule. Brownies. If you piss them off, though, they do go Bogart and they get violent. Nisse and Tomte in Norway and Sweden are kindly house spirits. Buka, which is Cornish, I think. And then there's the Bubak in Wales, who really likes cookies. They're the ones who will help out around the house. Yep. They'll help out around the house. They'll do stuff for you. If you insult them, then they will just wreck your house and hide shit. When people are like, I think I have fairies because they're hiding my shit, you probably just have a really pissed off house spirit. And by spirit, I mean fairy. The other belief of the origin of fairies is ancestors and the dead. So they're either fallen gods, fallen angels, or dead human spirits. Not yet, Jean. Almost. There's wood wives, wood fairies, all types of fairies that come wood, trees, and then the undergrounds, which is very like your gnomes, your dwarves, your orcs, Keebold, knockers, buka, spriggans. Those are all, they live in iron ore mines or some kind of metal mine. More metal mine than like gemstone you'll find. But those are your underground fairies. The courts in Scotland. So when you see people, and there's a lot of stuff in like anime and literature, hi Swan, that talk about the courts, the Seelie and the Unseelie. So the Seelie is the Golden Court. They are ruled, Shakespeare said that Oberon and Titania ruled them. Titania does not, Oberon apparently still does. They are nicer. This is why they call them the fair folk. A poor woman who could barely afford to give up food gave a fairy who begged from her some of her food. And the fairy returned everything that was given in tenfold for the rest of her life. This is Swan. Hi. So that's why they're called fair folk. They have a different set of morals and ethics, but they are fair. The Seelie are. If you piss them off, though, all bets are off. They're more likely to give you like a gentle warning before they completely wreck your shit, but they're still very intolerant. The Seelie, the Court of Air and Darkness, ruled by Queen Mab. Mab is also a version of the Morrigan Mab Bab triple goddess aspect of the Irish goddess of death and the dead, one or the other. But The unseelie court, basically all of the nasties that have ever nastied belong to the seelie court. And that does not make the solitary fairies in the seelie court trooping fairies, even though they belong to the seelie court. It's a loophole. The slua and the host belong to the seelie court. And when we think of like Halloween and the dead spirits roaming the earth and stealing babies and breaking everything, like just chaos, that comes from the slua. That comes from the wild hunt that happens on Halloween. In Fantasia, that night on Bald Mountain, that's the slua. That's the slua. Next slide. How to protect against them. Because I am super big on protecting against them. Let me read these. Appalachia does have some really good hill folk. Spiderwicks, yep. Swan, yes. You are Swan's biggest fan. Okay, so protection against them. So there are some fairies, speaking of Appalachia real quick, when all the Scottish and Irish people came, they settled in Texas, they settled in Appalachia, they settled in all their little hollers and valleys. They brought a lot of their gods with them. Some came with them, some couldn't. But so some of them are actually the indigenous land spirits that were already here. Some of them are our Celtic ones that came with us. Protection. The problem with protection against the Fae is there are over 1,000 species between 6 different nations. And that's only with the Celtic. You're not counting the indigenous. And depending on what country you are, I mean, they would be indigenous too, I guess. But unless you know exactly what you're dealing with, you really don't know exactly how to protect. And they will not identify themselves because that's how they rock. They don't like to be perceived. So it's very tricky when people are like, fairies are my friends, fairies are nice. Like, they lied to you. That is not what you're messing with. They do not. So self-bored stones, they talk about a lot in ancient books. Self-bored stones are hagstones, basically. A rock that wind or water has naturally bored a hole through. Those, if you look through them, yep, open pair of scissors, that's on there. If you look through the holes, you're supposed to be able to see them. It's a hack in their glamour. So that's why everybody needs to carry hagstones. Daisies are protection against them because they are sun magic. Daisies are only protection against unseelie and the nasties. They do not protect against the seelie court because they are the golden court. They love the sun and flowers and all that shit. Verbena, especially red verbena, the redder the better, is supposed to be, yep, shout out to Daisy. To Daisy! The redder the verbena is, the better it is for protection. They don't really know why. It's just like red. And it's really only against the unseelie that verbena protects against because, again, the seelie loves flowers. Church bells, and that only works against the seelie because the unseelie like to enchant dead human bodies, tie bells to them, to our rib cages with ribbon, and make our bones dance for entertainment. So bells don't really work against the unseelie. They don't give a fuck. They do work against the seelie. Sometimes, though, because the seelie also like bells in their dancing circles. But crosses, hymns, prayers, holy water, all that supposedly works because, again, they're supposed to be fallen angels. This really is a thing in Ireland. Mold, churchyard mold, one of the books says, so I'm guessing that's like lichen or something off a headstone. Very powerful against them. 4-leaf clovers, they're lucky because they break glamour. If you're holding one, you cannot be hypnotized or glamorized or whatever the term would be by any fae, and any that have been running on you, the spell's immediately broken. Verbena, Alabama, you should be good. Well, let's hope so, as long as it's red verbena, Alabama. St. John's wort. A lot of people, if you're on an SSRI, an antidepressant, do not take St. John's wort. But it's great defense against fairies. Apparently, it's also sun magic. Iron horseshoes, iron nails. This only works against the Seelie. There are at least two kinds of fairies that I can think of that actually are kind of masochistic. The redcaps of Scotland wear iron boots, and they are wildly allergic to iron. So it's actually incredibly painful. So that tells you how do not fuck with them they are. Crossing running water. A lot of the fairies in the Celtic lands can't cross running fresh water because there's a lot of lochs and streams and everything up there. There are a few that can, and there are even more that can cross salt water, which is a bigger problem. Hanging open pair of scissors over your unbaptized child's bed because it forms a cross. Terrifying, but effective, because way back yonder, before they were making them out of stainless steel, scissors were made of iron. Salt. What doesn't salt do? Salt protects against everything. That's just like, if you, I read something where somebody was at some kind of fairy banquet and they wanted to break that hack where, like, if you eat their food, you're stuck there forever. So if the fairies want to extend to you, like, hey, in good faith, we're not trying to trap you, here is a banquet, and they will sprinkle salt over all of the food, and that means that it's safe for humans to eat and you will not be trapped. So always salt your food. Bread. This one surprised me, but it was tied to like the blood of Christ and the body of Christ thing. People carry pieces of dried bread in their pockets, and it's sort of like having a cross on you, and it keeps them away. Whistling and clapping. This is a problem again. Whistling and clapping might keep some unseelie away, but it will attract a lot of seelie. It also attracts a lot of indigenous nasties like flesh peddlers and windy bagels, whose names I will not say because I live on those lands. So again, if you don't know exactly what you're rocking with, you don't know exactly what to do because you may make it worse. Rowan and ash trees are protection against the Sidhe also, for whatever reason. And this is my favorite one. If you think that you've been glamored and you've been got, turn your coat inside out, because it kind of breaks whatever hold is on the outside of your coat, and now you're invisible to them. So if you're rocking around and you feel like somebody's got an eye on you, turn your coat inside out and put it back on. Famous fairies. Cutie Pillar is going to like this one. So the gremlins are real. The Dullahan is the headless horseman, Sleepy Hollow. He is an ancient embodiment of the really ancient Tuatha De Danann, god of the dead, Crom Dubh, who also is called Crom Cruach. So he's real, and he's in New York, and he came over from Ireland, so they can come here. Stingy Jack is where we get jack-o'-lanterns. And I think, no, I didn't have that one. So Stingy Jack, there was this guy who was a drunk, and he was like, hey, devil, because you go in the devil in the crossroads, and it's a thing with folk magic. And the devil gives you whatever you want, and then you have X amount of time, and then the devil claims your soul. Well, he was able to kind of sneak around and trick the devil out of fulfilling the contract or holding up his end of the bargain, because he's a notorious drunk called Stingy Jack. So as punishment, the devil made him a little wispy light who roams around holding lanterns, and he lures travelers into bogs and lochs and to their death. And that is where we get the will-o'-the-wisp, and that is also where we get jack-o'-lanterns. Stingy Jack is a jack-o'-lantern. So you carve the jack-o'-lantern, which originally was made of turnips. They don't have pumpkins over yonder. They would carve the turnips, terrifying faces if you Google it, stick a candle inside, stick it outside, and it was a thing to keep Stingy Jack away, and it was also a sort of thing that kept the slough when they were coming and doing the wild hunt. They would pass your house over because Apparently, some nasty bogey beast was already there because terrifying turnip jack-o'-lantern. Gunsinach, it's the fairy Casanova. Literally, the way he is described, he is indescribably beautiful, charming, witty, fantastic lover. He's basically a succubus. He will entrance and steal your women, lock up your daughters, lock up your wives. We live in modern times, so nobody's safe now. But he will literally fuck you to death, and you will become obsessed with him, and you will go insane and waste away trying to get some of that sugar daddy dick, that good sugar dick. The Beobanshi, I know I'm butchering that, but again, I can't speak it. So the deer dew and the Beobanshi, the Beobanshi is almost like a banshee, but she's a vampire. Deer dew is the I think that's the Scottish vampire. They're two. One is more like a succubus vampire. She seduces you and then she also sucks your blood out. The other one is more like a lost soul ghost that wanders around wailing, almost like a banshee, but then she also sucks blood out of you. Are you coming up here, Snow? Snow might be coming up here. I have to guard everything that could be knocked over. So that's technically the end of that. Whatever. But the tiny little fairy that I was talking about earlier, the Cornish pixies, are actually precedent for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's fuckery and all that. They are like this big, and they are not completely fully intact human looking things, but they're the closest to it. And the Cornish people call them pigskies, or pixie, Piksy, but those are pixies, and that's the closest thing to Tinkerbell you're going to get in the lore. Okay, so Bavine, thank you, Cutie Pillar. Yeah. So questions. That's that. I could have gone way longer, but I didn't, because I didn't have a shit ton of time. Because I was like, this will only take half an hour, knowing that I have a tendency to ramble. What else can I think of? Oh, I didn't talk about the fucking Knucklevy. Good God. Okay, so before I get yeeted. Okay, so there's this nasty thing. It's my favorite fairy. Called the Knucklevy. And it's Scottish. Cutie Pillar, have you heard of it? I'm sure you have. Yeah. I think I might actually do another bigger one and then just host it on my stuff later. So the Knucklevy is a hell horse from the Orkney Hebrides Highlands in Scotland, way up north. And they think what happened folklorically, archaeologically, is when the Scottish and then the Norse cultures met, the bastard child of the Kelpie and the Usage, which is an even nastier water horse than the Kelpies. Yeah, thank you. I love Ashley too. I'll compensate her if she gets mad. So the Usage and the Norse Jotuns, who were the giants, came together and had a little love child, and it became the Knucklevy. And it is apparently the size of a building. It is a horse and rider, but the horse and the rider are one thing. It's kind of like a centaur, but it's a horse. And the man part is coming out of the middle of the back. There's no legs for the man. It's literally just torso and up. The arms are so long that they drag on the ground. And again, this thing is the size of a house. And the whole thing is inside out. So it's one giant bleeding red meat suit. And it kills crops. It can cross salt water, which is really uncommon for fairy stuff. Yeah, we are both Sagittariuses. It can cross salt water. So the thing that stops the Knucklevy that usually like doesn't stop other things basically is it's like reverse. The Knucklevy can cross salt water because it comes from the Orkneys and the Norse, which is basically sea hopping islands. What it cannot cross is fresh water. So the Knucklevy can, will, and has come from the islands and Europe to wherever its people are because it can do salt water like no problem. So if you think you've got a Knuck after you, just sit in a stream. Make sure it's really fresh water and never get out because you're doomed anyway. Like that thing's fucking terrifying. Go ahead and look it up. But yeah, it's terrifying and I love it. The Scottish went hard, real hard. Red caps, Knucklevies, nasty. I love them. Do I have time to talk about one more fairy? The very last one. And then I promise I'll shut up. Okay. It can kill you. It can kill you. Fairies can kill you. Yeah. The Scottish are like, here, hold my mead. Let's make it terrifying. So the red caps. The red caps kind of, you would think that they would look like little gnomes because you think like it's a tiny little thing and it's got a red hat. And, oh, that's cute. No. They have little red hats like the Nisse and the Tomte. They're not pointy. They're like beanies, basically. They wear iron boots, even though they are allergic to iron because they are masochists. And they keep their caps red by dipping them in the blood of the humans that they kill and eat. And that is why they're called red caps. They literally just drip in blood all the time. Scotland, what are you going to do? Yeah, just a little snackaroo. Just a little snackaroony. So yeah, that's that. That's what I have. I can do this again another time if people want. Keep all hands inside the vehicle at all times. Yep. Corn, it's got the juice. And coconuts. Coconut warning. Yep. Jamie's going haywire with the board. Thank you everybody for coming. I hope you learned stuff. If you didn't learn anything, I hope you were entertained. Message me everywhere. Let me know what you thought of and what you want to hear more about. And yeah, that's my deep dive into fairies. Yay! Want some swan before I go? It's just popped up. Come here. Come. People want to see some good swan content. There we go. There's the boy. It's the swan bear. It's the swan. He is the boy. He's a good boy. The other one's a brat. All right. So,